नहीं, प्रोफेसर रोहित श्रीवास्तव करेंगे। हैंड ओवर कर दूं या ये हटा दूं? अभी से इंट्रोड्यूस कौन करने? नहीं नहीं, एक बार मैं शुरू करूंगा, उसके बाद प्रोफेसर। ठीक है, अभी के लिए जरूरत नहीं है ना? राइट, मैं ये नहीं लाऊंगा। हाँ चलो, प्लीज अंडरस्टैंड प्रोफेसर।
फिर लगा देते हो
जी नहीं, हाँ बोल। नहीं कर रहा
हाँ।
कि उन्होंने बोला सिर्फ दो है।
हाँ
एक और प्रोफेसर को यही देना।
हाँ हाँ ठीक है, जो भी है और आएंगे ना बोलने के लिए आपके अलावा,
तो स्विच करना है।
हाँ उनको देना, मेन स्पीकर उनको ही लगा के रख देते हैं।
हाँ
It's live streaming actually. उनको थोड़ी देर बाद इनको सिर्फ अनाउंस करना है that is starting in 5 minutes to the online audience.
Okay. Just for people online, right?
Yeah, just for the minute.
Right. Good evening. For the audience joining us online, we will be starting in 2 minutes.
हैंड माइक भी यूज करना है
जब ये चले
और
जी।
चीजें।
No, it's the bio in March. I went through this round one. It's called biotech research and innovation. Everybody on the
Ma'am, please let me know when to begin.
Yeah.
All right. Just a point of clarification. This reads Professor Department. Is that correct? Professor of Department. Right? Okay. Just to know if that's it. Yeah. No problem.
Hello.
what is a good method of
कौन सा कोई आप शिफ्ट करने के जिस पर
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome the dignitaries present for today's edition of Professor N.R. Kamath's distinguished lecture. I'd like to specially welcome today's speaker, Dr. Shripal Mehta. To begin, we will have a video on the contributions of Professor N.R. Kamath's played now.
Why don't you come to Jumbo Bridge to main city? Let's you talk. Yeah. Alice will find Alice everywhere. Let me start my journey. Thanks.
very nice. Okay, Kamath.
The chemical engineering profession and teaching in India has been uniquely blessed by the benevolent touch of an illustrious guru, Professor N.R. Kamath. R.K. took up the position of Deputy Director in 1960. As the Deputy Director of the Institute in the early formative years, Professor Kamath held the center stage and undertook the yoking task of setting the framework and processes to streamline the running of academic programs. He was credited for drafting the Institute's earliest academic offerings and considered the father of all academic things, who strode the Institute corridors with the rules of his tongue. For many students, Professor Kamath was the inspiration that set them on the road to success. For some other students, his shoulders were the ones on which they rested their problems. For many young faculty, he was the ultimate mentor and role model. For the underdogs, he was their champion. For the institution, he was the epitome of an educationalist par excellence. Gurus such as Professor N.R. Kamath helped shape great institutions and bless the individuals in it with the priceless and sublime gift of knowledge that sustains over several generations. Thanks, Professor N.R. Kamath, for this priceless gift of knowledge and pioneering mentorship. You will always, forever, live in our hearts.
May I now request Professor Rohit Srivastava, Professor of Department of Biosciences and Bioengineering, to welcome the speaker and give an overview about Professor N.R. Kamath.
Thank you very much. A very warm welcome to all of you. I'll be using this cue sheet because I would like to welcome our speaker for this Professor N.R. Kamath lecture today. So once again, thank you to all of you who are attending physically and online this lecture series, which is part of the N.R. Kamath Distinguished Lecture Series today. I want to extend a warm welcome to today's speaker of the event, Dr. Shrifal Mehta, who is a member of Research and Entrepreneurial Advisory Committee to the Department of Biotechnology, Government of India, BIDAC. I have more to say about our speaker right after I explain or I tell you what the lecture series is all about, and then I'll come and welcome the speaker. Let me tell you a little bit about the series and Professor N.R. Kamath. We just saw a video, but most importantly, this lecture series, this is the Professor N.R. Kamath lecture series, is supported through the endowment created for the Professor N.R. Kamath Distinguished Chair Professorship. Today, we have gathered in memory of Professor N.R. Kamath, and I'd like to take advantage of the platform to talk a little bit about his work, leadership, and his tremendous contributions to the growth of IIT Bombay. We just saw an excellent video which talked about how Professor Kamath was instrumental in shaping the institute in its early years, and this was way back in 1960 when he was deputy director of the institute. He served as the founding head of the Department of Chemical Engineering, which we all know where it stands today, and this is all due to the efforts put in by Professor Kamath in its early years. As a respected teacher and educator, Professor Kamath had a profound impact on the formative years of IIT Bombay, as well as the chemical engineering profession in this country. When we were growing up, all we knew IIT Bombay in those years was the chemical engineering department. So you can imagine how much IIT Bombay has grown from that point onwards to today. He inspired everyone around him to achieve excellence in every step of the way. He was especially popular for his insightful lectures on the history of technology and was widely respected for not just the brilliant educator he was, but also the human being he was. And this is why this lecture series holds a lot of importance, because we get to hear from people who have achieved a lot in their lives. Professor Kamath was a trustworthy and dependable friend to his colleagues and a father figure to his students. He was truly an institution in his right and has left behind a legacy that will be cherished forever. On this note, I would like to now introduce our speaker. Dr. Shrifal Mehta is a successful entrepreneur, and he has several startups. So this is a big inspiration for many of the students, many of the postdocs working in this institute, and people who are joining in online. I'm sure they will learn a lot. And these are in the field of drug discovery and development for early concept and invention through product development and commercial launch. He was appointed in 2023 to a special research and entrepreneurial advisory committee to the Department of Biotechnology, Government of India, and is also an executive in residence at Columbia Tech Ventures. He is currently executive chair at Pulmokine Incorporated, a clinical stage drug company that he co-founded, and he started a new company focused on therapeutics for retinal and neurodegenerative diseases. Big area again. He is the author of the industry-leading biomedical technology commercialization textbook and manual for bio-entrepreneurs. And I see that he's brought that book along titled Commercializing Successful Biomedical Technologies, covering drugs and devices from concept to commercialization. A really interesting read for people who would like to step into this field. This has been recognized as the Bible and the roadmap for entrepreneurs and executives in the biotech industry, in addition to being used as a textbook in several universities. Additionally, as founder of materials company, he's also guided an energy storage product, which is supercapacitors, from academic laboratory design to a marketed product. He has also had a biomedical research career that has resulted in over 30 publications in leading science journals, book chapters, and invited talks in international conferences. Dr. Mehta has a BS in mathematics from UT Austin, an MS in biomedical engineering from Rutgers, and a PhD in biomedical engineering from University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center. And he grew up in Mumbai, India. So once again, Dr. Mehta, a warm welcome to you and a big round of applause for welcoming our speaker here today. Thank you very much.
Namaste. I think I'm set up. Namaste, Devio or Sajjano. I love that beginning, such a lovely way to start a talk. I'm very embarrassed after such a long analysis of and elaboration of my background, but I hope that what little I have to share here can be useful to you. We have a small group here, so please feel free to consider questions. I will have a couple of pauses in between some of the sections of the talk so we can allow some questions as we proceed. Because the talk today is essentially around opportunity recognition and translational research with more of a focus on the few things that I know, which is around life sciences driven innovations. So talk a little bit about what it means to actually recognize what is the value of something that you think is an opportunity and how do you assess that, and then taking that forward. But also, what are some of the typical commercialization pathways in biological sciences? So those two sections will be kind of the first part. Then I will have a short segment on what are some current trends, and this is more for the students of engineering right now at IIT and biological sciences who are thinking about where to take their careers and how to establish their particular strengths and skills in areas that are coming up. So very brief and some highlights only, because that is a talk, many talks by itself in that topic. And then a little bit about the BIRAC and what is available in India as a very exciting and emerging ecosystem for helping you all to develop your ideas into commercial products here and what has been quite successful. So when you first start looking at ideas around you from either problems you're seeing or from research that you're exposed to in labs, you start to think about this as an opportunity, but there are lots of gaps between having the ideas and then trying to understand what it means. And in most cases, it's not exactly as clear as someone knocking on the door and saying, "Hi, I'm opportunity, let's move together." So you have to explore a little bit what it means, and that's partly what I'm going to, just talk to you about a little bit. So first of all, when you think about entrepreneurship and starting a new venture from an idea or from a technology invention that you have, it's important to understand that not every idea leads to a new venture right away, right? Some ideas are really good for licensing out. Some ideas need to be matured a little more. Maybe the application is there, but let's say the jet ski on air is not ready for market yet. It's a great idea maybe. So there are a level of understanding on how do you bring some of those initial ideas and assess whether to take them forward or to build a new venture or license them out. That's part of what I do as an XIR at Columbia Tech Ventures. They have about 6 or 7 of us. They put new ideas in front of us. We try to give some thoughts and exchange ideas around, should we license it out? Should the professor take it out and build a new company? And so this is an area that I'm mostly involved in quite regularly. And so the first thing is an idea is not a business, but it can be, but you need to understand it. So what we're going to talk about is how do you make that understanding happen and how do you assess value, right? The most attractive ventures, in my own experience, the ones that have got the most traction are the ones that are actually market driven. And what do I mean by that? Means that you have found a need in the market. There is a hole in the market, you think you can fit into it. Now, what you will learn is that's not the whole of the market itself also, but in that process, what you have to do is find whatever fits as a solution. So you are coming into this as a technology agnostic approach, focused solely on solving what you found as the problem. So this is quite different from the majority of ventures that come out of academia, which are the second type, which is a technology-driven venture. And when you look at a technology-driven venture, it's described often as a hammer looking for a nail, which means you have found something that's quite powerful, new technology, but now where are you going to apply it? Where can it be the most useful? And in that market-driven venture, there is a pull. because you have found a problem, there is a pull to bringing the best technology and to finding that path to market. Whereas in a technology-driven venture, you're hunting around, what's the killer app? Out of all these different applications that this new invention can do, how do you understand which one to bring forward? And I'll give you a little secret right here. It's usually not the largest market for a new technology that becomes the first driver or the first product that you want to bring out. It's actually where you find the best fit and the most need in the market. It should not just be a nice to have, but you want to develop a product that is a must have. And that's really the best fit between a technology driven venture and a market driven venture approach. Because a lot of times when you have this initial invention, it's a platform. It can generate many different ideas. And there are ways to take that forward, but ideally, almost always you will find that a platform invention ends up coming back to this thing, where is the problem, where is the biggest need, that's going to be our first product. Everything else is put aside because everything is evaluated on that basis. So how do you then assess this idea, this technology? It's a lemon, you have to make lemonade. What do you make with it, right? So I'll give you one example that I use sometimes in my classes. How many of you know what is a hybridoma? Okay. Go ahead.
So basically, a hybridoma is a B cell which is fused with I don't exactly recall, but in concept, it's like two cancer cells fused together.
Yeah, that's exactly very close to what an hybridoma is, but I don't really care what it is. What I'm really more interested in is what can you do with it, right? Because that's the technology versus the need or the application in the market. And so what can you do with that technology? Now, I put hybridoma as one example because it's a little esoteric name. Not most people not in biotech don't know about that. But more important to understand is from an engineer's and technologist's perspective, we get carried away. Oh, how do you fuse these two cells? Or how do you make two cancer cells join as one? What's the point? The more important question is, what's the use of that function or application? And now this may seem very crass to the academic researchers, but we are here to talk about translational research, right? We're not talking about really developing an entirely new invention. We're assuming that's happened. That whole ideation and that process of invention has happened. We're now trying to understand how do we assess whether that technology has economic development potential or commercial potential. So fundamentally, focus on what it can do, not what it is. Is one of the first steps. Then you have to understand who values that particular function. Who is it that is going to buy what you have? Why would they buy? And what are they going to do with it? Does it solve a real problem that they have? Is it just something that, oh, it's a cool new technology, I'll buy a couple of these to keep around on my desk, I'll play with them once in a while. So that now allows you to understand whether it's a product you're selling or is it a service that you're selling. And that's a big distinction because even in a product-driven business like therapeutics, for example, you can still consider service, diagnostics, for example. There's a service you're offering. You're selling a product, but in the end, it's a service for diagnostics. So where in that whole framework of the business model, and we'll come to what a business model is this function best related to creating a new product or creating a new service? And with that, you have to finally come down to saying, okay, well, if someone values it and you are creating a product, what's it worth to them? How much are they going to pay? And that starts to build your model of understanding and assessing what the technology can actually achieve in terms of a new venture or a new product line. So when you are able to do those first steps, you have started the process to say capturing that value creates a business model. A business model is nothing but a way to how do you take that new idea or that new product and bring value in to create an enterprise that can support salaries, next products, growth, etc. And so the business model just says, I'm going to build something at a lower cost and sell it at a higher value, fundamentally. Okay, that's what you're aiming at. Or you're going to offer a service that will bring in more revenue. So the business model is basically that understanding of where you fit into the market. Now, again, when we come back to this question, what is that technology? We already said we don't care what exactly it is, but what it can do. So this is actually a hybridoma is actually now to be thought about as a factory, because that combined joint cell is nothing but a production unit that makes something extremely valuable and extremely useful, new therapeutics, biological therapeutics, monoclonal antibodies as the beginning of where hybridoma. And so these are high value products that you cannot make any other way. So that technology serves as the footprint or the base for creating these product lines. So this is how understanding of a technology needs to shift through the steps of saying what it is to what it can do and what it can help to do. So one of the questions that one of my friends and mentors, if you will, was head of R&D for GE Health and Diagnostics, his first question to any technician or scientist who came up to him and said, I've got this new analyte or this new discovery of this new biomarker. His first question was, so what? Just so what? What does it mean? What does it matter? Who cares? And it's actually a very pertinent, very flippant sounding question, but it's a very pertinent question to understand and go a little deeper to say, ask that question 3 times, 4 times, till you start to get to the root of it. So what? Well, I can measure this faster. So what? In the end, you got to get to clinical relevance and solving someone's major health problem. Then you know you've got a problem and a product that fits. So that so what question is a very important part of assessing what is the opportunity in this initial technology or invention that you found. And of course, in the end, you want to understand who will pay for that value and whether there is enough value to sell it for a profit, because otherwise there's no point starting a company if you are not able to eventually generate a profit out of it, because you will not sustain. That is the bottom line. Everyone talks about sustainability. Well, the first lesson of sustainability is you got to make enough money to survive and keep building. So from that, you come up with this business plan on how do you bring that technology, having assessed the initial parts of it, into a, and it's very simple. You got to find a way to make money. Okay, it's that simple. If it works, otherwise keep cycling till new ideas come up. That's again being a little flippant, but what is important to recognize is that not every invention is a product, right? So this is a very quick understanding of invention versus innovation. Innovation is the product or the service that you're selling. And the example is, let's say, take a lithium-ion battery. I'm going to give you a lithium-ion battery today. And you're going to say, wow, that's cool. I just paid you $100 for it. Now, what do I do with it? And you're stuck. This is not, the invention is not the product. It's not the innovation. The first actual big use of lithium-ion batteries was in portable CDs, iPods. Those are the technologies where enough power and enough energy content to let you run long enough through multiple songs or travel or a trip allowed you to carry the Walkmans. I don't know, that's a dated term for most people here, but CD players and then DVD players and so on. The lithium, thin, enough energy. So this is where the invention leads to the innovation that leads to actual products and creating something that's of use out there. And there are some other examples here in this list that you saw. So when you do all this, you started to have some sense, okay, I have an invention, now how do I understand what the value is of that? So this is an interesting question, and the value of any product is only based on, the answers in front of you, but anyone want to tell me something on what do you think the value of an innovation or a product is based on? How big of a market you have for it, right? That's the fundamental thing. What are the markets and what's the application? It's not, you don't need an engineering degree to tell you that. And so this is very simple, but it's not that straightforward, because now you have a perspective. Are you the seller of that technology? And if you are the seller, you are positioning yourself at a high value because you own it and you want to sell it for as much as you can. If you're a buyer, you have a slightly different perspective because you want to buy it at the cheapest price you can get, pay for it, right? You don't want to overpay. So in between somewhere is going to be the value of the technology. And there is no true value as such. It all depends on the perspectives. It all depends on the context. The same product line, if a company is in distress and going bankrupt, could be sold for $10 today and bought by someone else for $100 million tomorrow. So the technology value is a context-driven understanding, and that's what I wanted to point out here, okay? That's the main point. So what does that mean for you? Well, you have to establish the context, simple. You have to establish what is that, is there a laser here? Oops, sorry, I think I did something, yeah. Anyway, so the market is what you want to establish, and so we'll come to that in a minute. So as you go through the steps going from the initial idea, which then is represented in intellectual property, and intellectual property is a commercial product, if you will. Just think about that. People buy and sell patents, right? Patent is your first product that you will have in your enterprise, in your company. It is very important. A patent is a commercial tool. Your decision on whether to patent or not should be made on a commercial basis first. And so going from patent, there are many different steps as you go towards product. And as you engage in all these steps, your main job as an entrepreneur, as a driver, as a technopreneur, which is the term that I like to use for technologists who've kind of leading the companies, the technopreneur job is to reduce risk over time. And as you do that, you will increase the value of the enterprise, because reduce risk means you've addressed problems in the hurdles to get to market. And all those different steps that you saw, you are getting closer and closer to market. As you get closer to market and the risk is lower, the value of your enterprise and of what you're building goes up in the perspective of whoever is investing. So this is what I meant by perspective-driven valuation. It all depends on where you are. Now, anyone want to, I'm not sure. First, let me just ask a quick question, which I actually wanted to do earlier. How many of you are involved currently in a startup? A couple of people. How many are thinking about joining a startup or would like to? Okay. And the rest of you are here to learn, which is great. So the bottom line is there are a few milestones that are really relevant to understanding risk reduction. I'll just mention two of them. In the biologics side, one of the key milestones is safety. Because you can do all the good you want, but if you're creating a whole host of side effects, no one's going to take your product. So safety is, number one in biomedical products, because you're interacting with human health. So if you can demonstrate a safe outcome for people interacting with your product, service or product or therapeutic or whatever it is, then you have immediately reduced a significant risk of getting to market, and that creates a big increase in value. So that's a milestone to think about. If you are building your research programs, your development programs, that's an important milestone. Another one for a product that is non-biological, let's say a consumer product, what's the most important milestone there you can think about? Your customer, having a first customer, right? You can make all the beta prototypes you want and they all look great, but if the screen freezes the first time you're in front of a customer, it's not much use. But a customer ready to buy is actually when you know you have your product. Everything before that is a wannabe product. When you have a customer, that's the one who actually defined what your product should be. Hence the whole concept, get your beta tests out, get your minimum viable product, your MVP out there as quickly as possible so you get that first customer feedback to help improve all this. So this whole factor of risk reduction is very much dominant in any new technology-driven enterprise. And as you develop that product or that invention or that innovation, the risks change. The first, usually technical, right? Is it feasible? Does it work doing what you want to do? And then sometimes management risk becomes important. Do you have the right people who know how to execute on this? Do they know whom to call? Do they know what questions to ask? And sometimes financial. Can you raise enough money? Is the market ready for this? Can you be competitive enough? So all these risks have to be managed, and they all will vary based on the context of your development and where you are in that development. Okay? So what I wanted to then talk about is how do you understand when a new opportunity is actually coming in front of you, and especially for biotech. Okay, so I'm switching now to talk a little bit more focused on life sciences-based technology development. And so there are a few ways you can be a monitor by reading papers, attending conferences. You can look at regulatory changes. And I'll give you one great example of a very recent regulatory change that has driven an entire industry segment to grow, the FDA about a year and a half ago declared that they wanted to adopt systems on a chip or organs on a chip technology that uses human cells to assess new therapeutics instead of using animals. So animal studies are the standard, and you submit all the toxicity. Hundreds and thousands of mice have died bringing a single drug, forward to market. So instead of that, they allowed the consideration of robust human cells grown in organoids or any such method, and data around that to talk about safety and other properties, and they would allow that to process through instead of the standard animal studies. That has generated an entire new segment of the market, organs on a chip, lab on a chip, if you will, that is developing the first units that are industrialized testing with cells grown in organoids are already reaching market. So this was technology in development, got a big boost as a new opportunity because of regulatory changes. So monitoring regulatory changes is a very good way to understand new opportunities in biotech. And of course, some particular new invention that just breaks through CRISPR, as if you've heard about that, allows you to consider a totally new modality, etc. So when you start putting all these pieces together, you have to now bring your model, your business model, and make a plan. And everyone tells you, write your business plan, write your business plan. And this is a statement that is sometimes very good to keep in mind, that the plan, while you do need to write it, it's actually the process you're going through that is much more relevant than the plan, because the plan is static. As of that moment, you have crystallized your weeks of work and written this beautiful, I don't know, however many pages. Today, to go more than 2 pages is like, why am I doing this? So most people don't have time to read a 15, 20, 30-page business plan, but let me tell you, 20 years ago, this was kind of a standard. You have to submit like these detailed things, and I don't know, again, who read them. It was usually the executive summary, and you make a decision, right? But the important part of it is planning. That discussion that you've had amongst your team with your CFO, your financial persons, your partners, that's much more relevant, and that creates a base of understanding to communicate your idea. So this is where a business plan creation, most people say write a plan. Well, I'm just here to tell you a few tools that will help you build the right business plan. And the first bottom line is, when you start with your invention or your innovation idea, you need to understand how you will make a product out of it. And as part of that is that assessment I talked about, right? That problem that you found. Once you develop your product, you understand what steps you need to take to develop that product out, how many trials, what is the size of the human trial, how many animal studies, how much you have to manufacture. All of those things make your product development plan. Once you know that, on that you can build a budget, because you know how much money you will need, how many animals, how many humans, whatever. And you can then start to understand from your development strategy what could be a business model. Are there earlier stages in your development path that you can generate revenues instead of having to go through all the clinical trials and come to a final product, which can take a while. We'll see that in a minute. And so from the budget, you can create a financial plan. How are you going to finance that budget? And then a business plan out of that, right? So that's the stepping stones or the structure to building your business plan concept out. This is not here to push my book, honestly, because you already heard about that. But what I wanted to point out is there is a website. In my opinion, this book is quite high priced. But I recommend if you go to the website below, there are several different papers and summaries that will be very useful. They're available for free, and there are teaching slides for each chapter. You can get a good summary synthesis of each of the chapters. And so I encourage you to go do that, and hopefully some of the material is useful. But what is important here is you're formulating hypotheses and testing it. And every engineering and scientist knows and understands this process. So how do you apply it to a business? When you make assumptions, you are essentially formulating a hypothesis. I'm assuming that this particular problem will be solved with my product and this market will buy it. Well, how can you formulate it in such a way that you can test it? You can do that even before you have a product. You can just go talk to a customer and say, if I give you something like this and you are able to now do this in your work instead of what you're doing today, will that be helpful, and why and how? And so you can get that feedback right away to understand if your hypothesis or your assumption is actually valid. But this is an iterative process. As you start thinking about what market research you're doing, you'll pick up information that will create new IP maybe. You will then understand what steps to create your new product with and how to manufacture. But your regulatory plan, if you're not thinking about it on day one, you're going to end up in a hurdle or hitting a brick wall sometimes. So you really need to go through this cycle to make your planning come together correctly. So that's the iterative nature of creating a business model and a business plan from your beginning invention and innovation, thinking about even at reimbursement levels. I'll give you one quick example. We're looking at a retinal drug for retinal degenerative diseases, which today are treated by ophthalmologists in their offices by giving you an injection into your eye so the drug can reach the back of the eye. They make a lot of money for giving you this injection. They get paid a lot. So it's not just the cost of the drug, but it's their service that is bundled together as their reimbursement. If I am now wanting to bring out a drug that is oral in nature, that you can just with a prescription go home, no involvement of the doctor other than the prescription, do you think I'm going to face a hurdle from the doctors? I think so. Even if it's effective, they're like, oh, well, the injection's very effective. I'll just keep doing that. I'm making more money. So you have to think about reimbursement. You have to think about all of that as you're starting your business plan and understand that very well before you launch into this. So this is all part of assessing that initial technology idea, okay? And I've dragged you all the way to commercialization, but for a reason that it is important in your planning. So new insights, following basic science, regulatory changes, but tapping thought leaders. This is very useful. You can now start to interact with researchers to say what's new, what's coming up, where are some of the breakthroughs that I should be looking at. And what some people forget is there is a lot of literature out there that is now digitized and available. Searching with right key terms can yield some real golden treasures. Right now, we are targeting in our new company a biological enzyme that was discovered 35 years ago and has a ton of literature around it, but for many different reasons has been abandoned by large pharma to develop. We are picking that up. We have a new molecule and we're taking it forward. And that historical literature has become extremely useful for us to point out the relevance of what we're doing. So there is good value. How do you now, looking at the realities of building a biotech company, this is for therapeutics, okay? But medical devices, maybe the timeline is shortened, but the complexity is not, to tell you frankly. And so you have your first IP usually from a government or academic institution, and you've licensed that into your company in order to give you the rights to develop it further. You have to figure out how to finance it. And your early funding is government programs, like the BIRAC programs I'll tell you about in a minute. VCs, this is, F&F can be read as friends and founders or family and fools, or whatever you can get your money from to get started. In the US, people have credit cards and they get credit card money to start, not, in my opinion, the right way or a good way to start. But essentially, even early stage partnerships with strategic partners can be very useful to get you that first funding. As you develop this company through all the stages, and I'm not going to bore you by walking through all of them, but to point out that financing and context of technology development and assessment can vary. So in certain stages, you will come with strategic partners that will value what you've developed before your product is ready for market, and that becomes an additional financing stream. So it's not like you have to take 10 years and figure out how to raise money for 10 years before you can generate $1 of revenue. That's not a fundable model, okay, honestly. You have to find other ways to bring money in. And as you build your company out, one of the most important things is public equity. As you need your large, 2,000, 5,000 crore funding or larger to build out manufacturing, typically it's public markets that you will go to. And so these overall financing strategy is, I just wanted to point out, it's not as critical when you're starting the company out, right? Okay, the most critical thing you're going to need to do to talk to investors and figure out your financing is explain your business model. Okay, your assumptions and how you understand what the value is and what your market is. So the first step is you need to segment your market. And I have a great example. I'll show you what that means. And then how much of the market, of this market, can I hope to get? Find benchmarks, state all your assumptions, make sure you understand the competitive landscape. All of these steps you have to do, and I already mentioned market adoption and market acceptance, right? Once you've done that, then run the benchmark on your assumption. That's important, not just generally, oh, this market is good and I think this is growing, but find out what assumptions you're making for your product to work in that and solve that problem. And then there are other benchmarking things that you can do to understand how to get the size of the market, okay? And the size of the market, as the example here will point out, is not always what you think initially it is going to be. And this is a great example on an insulin pump. An insulin pump is a pretty invasive device. It delivers insulin in response to a rise in sugar levels in your body so that your it can be balanced out. And so this is a continuous monitoring with of infusion. And it's a pretty, it's the technology is mature now to where the sizes are very small, but it's still an invasive device. So that's a big market. Diabetic patients all over the place. Everyone in their family has someone who's diabetic, right? It's a huge opportunity. But hold on, what is the referral chain? What happens when they first get diagnosed with diabetes? Well, the first thing that's going to happen is the doctor is going to give oral medication. So your available market is now a little bit less. Now the people will go and say, well, it's not working, so give more different oral medications, change the dosing, adjust something. Then add insulin and orals. And so your market of who is going to be, getting your pump is already now much smaller. And multiple insulin, and then finally you will say, I've lost hope, there's no other real solution, I'll take the infusion pump. So your market that you thought initially was this is now come to this. Is still potentially a viable market, but now you have something tangible to understand and evaluate. And now you have a realistic value proposition that you can talk about, okay? So this is market segmentation. And this is a great, I find this a great example. Another way to understand where you're going is this referral chain. When the patient comes in with the first problem, oh, I have a pain here, or what happens? Who do they see? Primary care doctor, orthopedic surgeon, next therapist, next resolution, devices to help assist. All that is part of the process till they resolve the issue. That is the referral chain, and you follow the dollars, you follow the money to understand who is getting paid what, and now where is your idea intervening in that referral chain. And that allows you to really explain to yourself first, because you need to understand whether you are willing to put your life energy into creating a new venture and a new product. And then, of course, to investors, whether this market application for your product is reasonable or not. So this is a referral chain method which is very useful for positioning your technology. In the end, you will come down to what they call an indication. An indication is nothing but says it's a specific disease format that your product is going to address. So it will be breast cancer patients who have failed this therapy, who are this particular type of cancer, and so it's segmenting the market. Okay, that indication will become your approval label by the regulatory body. The DGSCO, the FDA, different countries, federal, regulatory bodies will issue you that you can only sell your product for this indication, for this disease. That indication is your gate to the market. That indication defines what your market actually is. So now we have kind of gone through all of these different steps to understand what makes your technology, how to assess it, what it does, how do you put it in the context that actually makes sense and creates or establishes a value, okay? Now, how do you pitch it to an investor? Well, I don't have to tell you, and I'm not going to try and do a whole how do you pitch, but let me give you the other side of the perspective. How does an investor look at this? What are they looking for? Right? You need to know that so that when you are putting your presentation together, you are addressing what they need. And so what they need is low risk, lowered risk. How does that lowered risk? Well, it's a big enough market, then the risk is kind of, okay, I can take a bigger risk because the payoff is going to be much larger if I win. And a solution that is really distinctively better than anything else that's out there is ideal because you are differentiated. And differentiation is a very strong strategy to create new products and new market applications. But is it better for both physicians and patients? Because it's very easy to say, let's solve this patient's sickness, this illness, this particular problem, but is the physician's life better? You think of the example I gave you of the injection in the eye. My oral drug is not helping them. I have a hurdle to create a market or adoption because of that particular angle. So if it is viable for both, that's even better. Without a big advantage or improvement, people are not going to change. The medical industry is the last ones to adopt change. And so you have to show distinctly, and of course, this could be put right up front for most investors. They're looking for the team, right? They want to see someone with passion. That's the word that they use. And what does that mean? That means that you have gone through all these processes to understand that your invention or innovation has value. You are buying into it yourself because you've done this assessment, and you're ready to do what it takes to bring it to market because you believe that this is going to be very useful, right? Whether it's going to make a lot of money, whether it's going to create a better, wellness for someone, whatever it may be. But this is what they want to see. And of course, proven meaning as part of your team. Now, if you're a first-time entrepreneur, you're not going to have the track record, but can you build someone into your team that actually has done that before? And that's enough. You don't have to be the one that has done it before if you're the entrepreneur, technopreneur, obviously. And then, is there a clear regulatory path? This is important because if you're going to do a clinical trial, that endpoint is actually death, you're in for a long haul waiting for people to die. And there are some trials and diseases where mortality is the endpoint for the FDA. That's a terrible area to get into. It's very problematic. Alzheimer's is another very problematic area. The metric is very subjective, very variable. To get your statistics, you have very large trials. So is there a clear regulatory path? These are the things investors are looking for. Now, you have to balance all that. Alzheimer's is a huge unmet need. If you have a real product, you will address all of the rest, right? So this is the overall context that they look in, and then is your IP, your patents, are they allowing you to commercialize? Okay, I won't get into that. In your presentations, I will only point out this last point. Everything else is all contextual, but you have to find a way to get them excited about what you're doing. And the two emotions that are most common are greed and fear. You got to increase the greed or the excitement of what you're doing and reduce the anxiety or the fear of what you might fail at. And how can you manage all that? These points will help if you are able to create your pitch with these comments, okay? All right, now I'm going to pause here for just a couple of minutes because I'm switching to a very quick format of trends, which I'm just going to highlight. And because you're all reading about technology, I don't need to bore you with more of here's what's coming. You've heard that. So I'll go through this section quickly, but before that, let's pause for some questions on what I've already talked about. Okay, if not, then let's continue and we'll come back with opening questions. So I'm going to cover three areas: drugs, devices, diagnostics. But in nucleic acid diagnostics, molecular, what they call molecular diagnostics, DNA-based diagnostics, spatial genomics is kind of emerging as the next area where you're taking a look at a tissue sample that is a pathology sample, and you're able to pick out individual cells. Imagine from the periphery of the tumor versus the inside of a tumor, and you can do a genomic analysis on that. That's the level at which the technology has moved in the labs today, and it has slowly become commercial. That is exciting. That allows you to create therapeutics that are very finely tailored to the exact disease, because as you all probably know by now, cancer is not a single disease. And even within a cancer, there are different kinds of cells that are present in the tumor. So this spatial genomics allows you in many different areas. Cancer is just the most dominant example, but there are other areas also. Ability to increase speed by creating new ways of copying DNA has become the next generation sequencing, and sequencing of DNA is now kind of standard to where costs are continuing to drop every year, and people are starting to use this for just personal use, like 23andMe, the company that has, take a swab of saliva, you get your whole history and everything. So there are markets developing with this improvement in speed of analysis. Examples of applications would be the ability to quickly assess at the bedside of the patient in a point of care system, is it a bacterial infection? Is it virus? If it's bacterial, what kind of bacteria? So I know which drug to give you. It's not a drug resistance bacteria, etc. So the other area that's growing is what I already mentioned, systems on a chip, organs on a chip. I won't spend more time there, but because I've already talked about that now. But their microfluidics, engineering, and electronic interfaces to cells is becoming very important to understand. And that's where your engineering studies could actually be involved in that area as you go. In medical devices, there are several broad areas: metallurgy, mechanical, electrical, interface with neurons, right? That's the exciting kind of new thing that Musk has now got his company Neuralink that is designing. It's not new. People have done that before. They've had monkeys in England, with the brain connection, moving levers to get a banana in California, for example. That's been demonstrated like 20 years ago. But the ability to do it now in real time with high compute power is phenomenal. And that's what's changing some of this area. But if you're involved in the miniaturization, you are in the right track because that's where medical devices are heading. And mobile computing creates data, and integration of data into medical devices is the trend that is just continuing to accelerate. India has a particularly big gap, in my opinion, and from what little I know now, 70 to 80% of our medical devices are imported. There is a problem. There is no good supply chain, for materials, but that's not an excuse. It's certainly a need over here to develop lower cost medical devices that are specific to the problems we face in India. And I think that's where a lot of work is pending, and there's support that's coming to help that happen. Atmanirbhar Bharat, the Build and Make in India, etc. But in that area, 3D organ printing is what I mentioned as part of this whole diagnostic and drug development, but also as new organ segments that can be put into your body, blood vessels, for example. Okay, I think I'm going to run out of time, so I'm going to have to move a little quicker. I'll just mention briefly the biotech drug industry. What used to be molecules that were initially designed and extracted from natural sources, think salicylic acid, aspirin, came from sarsaparilla, the tree that people found, the willow tree that had benefits historically. They extracted and made aspirin. That was the tradition. All our drugs 100 years ago came from known biological sources and nature. Today, we are developing cells. We are taking human cells, modifying them, putting them in to play around with your immune system as the most effective cancer therapies that we've seen out right now today. So the tools have changed in drug development, and stem cells and tissue engineering and gene therapy are the direction where people are going. And you should be thinking about where in silico or creating an analytical platform for that can help predict and understand better what genes and cells are doing, okay? That's an area where I think in India, some of the data handling and management capabilities in mathematics can be extremely useful. Okay, I won't get into some of that, but nanostructured materials and nanomaterials are always continuing. Okay, I'm going to continue to just wrap up over here. What I wanted to bring to your attention, for many of you who are thinking about joining companies or starting new ones, is that there is an ecosystem that is uniquely being developed by the government. I was really, surprised when I saw this, the extent to which this has been done when I first interacted with Birac about a year and a half ago. And it's amazing what they've done. So the bioeconomy, which is kind of a broad description, okay? It covers industrial, biotechnology, therapeutics, vaccine, everything, has been growing significantly. And a lot of it is because of infusions by the Department of Biotech to help support some of this growth. They are planning to continue to grow that, and biomanufacturing is a big part of that game. As you know, India already manufactures a significant portion. 1 out of every 3 pills, every 4 pills taken in the US has been made in an Indian factory, I think is the data. But those are small molecules, chemistry. Now, BIRAC has developed an entire ideation to end support to build your enterprise, the most significant of which is this big grant. Or the reason for that is they give a significant amount of money to help you build prototypes, to help you do proof of concept. And this big program has resulted in several hundred products out on the market today. They start with supporting entrepreneurship through their BioNest and early projects such as the EUVA, which give a few lakhs to someone who is just coming up with an idea, wants to try it out, wants to explore the market, to the big grant, which allows you to build your laboratories out. I think it's now almost up to 1 crore that they are able to give or will be giving in the near future for the big grants. So there's some significant money put towards supporting new companies, and much of this is grants. It is not tying up your equity in your company. They have incubators. Over 75 incubators have been built around India, supporting biotech and biomedtech development. IIT, of course, here has one of them. Bangalore has a very exemplary one that has done some amazing developments and companies coming out of there. And a few other key towns, but even in smaller towns, you're seeing people, and I'll show you a map that just blew my socks off when I saw it last time. So the amounts over here are describing, so big was 50 lakhs, I think it's moving now to up to 1 crore plus can be given for that. And then as you go further, you will be able to access various fundings from the BIRAC programs. Go to their website, there's a lot of information. There are case studies put up there. There are examples of products that have been developed by BIRAC funded enterprises. What BIRAC has also done is not only support the development of entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs with their incubators and the money that they're supporting, but they have also invested in VC funds, kind of a fund of funds approach. So over 10 VC funds have gotten money from this fund of funds, and they have created a new Bio Angels network. One of the reasons for that is there is a very active angel network in India supporting IT company development, but the know-how to invest in biotech and medtech is lacking in many of the entrepreneurs who've been successful in other areas. They don't understand the science-driven, biotech-driven companies as well. How do you evaluate something like that? You need a context, right? And so the BioAngel network is also doing education of investors in order to get them more ready to invest in these companies. A lot of interesting points there, but essentially you are getting the benefit of a lot of work that has been done by BIRAC over the last 6 years to develop this ecosystem out. This is what blew my socks off. This is where the big grant proposals come from in India. It is all over the place. There's even a dot here in Andaman and Nicobar Islands, right? So anyone with a good idea is able to apply and is applying to these big grants. The startups versus individual entrepreneurs, you can see the numbers right here. So you are encouraged as an individual entrepreneur to think about applying for this. 25% women, 75% men in the applicants, and then most of them are for medtech devices, and some are distributed over industrial biotech and healthcare. So you can see there is a pretty broad scope of what is supported for this development. So I just wanted to leave this with some of the results that have been obtained through the last 6 or 7 years of funding by BIRAC. These are some of the products out on the market. You can go on their website and learn more about what exactly these are. This is just a quick snapshot. So, but it ranges from agro biotech to industrial, waste to energy, to therapeutics, to diagnostics, and to devices. They are planning to continue to grow this support. The Department of Biotech has voiced that this is the goals that they are putting out there. And this year, as part of one of the committee meetings that we just had a few weeks ago, I understood they are doubling their grant commitment, as I just mentioned, on the big and other grants. So there is a bright future here for growing, your inventions out. I've walked you through a few steps of how do you assess these opportunities and then the context of the ecosystem that you have available here. So thank you so much for your attention, for coming here today, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Professor. I believe that you can empower entrepreneurs and aspiring students with your insightful lecture. I'm sure the audience agrees with me on this. The floor is open to questions and answers.
Dr. Mehta, this is something that students ask often, which is, do we look for ideas with indigenized technology available elsewhere? You spoke of it in the context of medical devices. Or should we look for something that will stand the test of global standards? Are there any right or wrong answers in this?
So you will start with your local markets. That's where you're starting. So you will have to create something that is addressing a problem that you can very readily start to generate some revenues, for example. But your applications, especially in healthcare, are automatically global. So my suggestion is address your first available local market, but plan for the global launch of your technology. And one clear example here, a company that I'm on the board of based out of Pune has developed a technology, imaging technology for pharmaceutical product analysis in its manufacturing stages. They created a market locally of over 100 customers in India, and now are being kind of merged into a US company that I'm on the board of to bring that technology to the global market. So they started by creating a solution that now, looking at the global market, they've morphed it to a system-wide kind of a SaaS-based solution. It's a software technology. So but yeah, I hope that answers. Yes, go ahead.
Excellent talk, Dr. Yeah. So one question I had was, when you've set up a company in India, and this is, with respect to, a few students of mine, when they started raising money and they went to, of course, angels, they were not targeting VCs, right? The first thing that these people were told was that, why don't you raise money from the US? Is it more easier to do that, to raise money from US, set up a company in US,
Yeah.
and then, come back to India and then do all your R&D in India?
So that kind of brings back the point I made earlier of why BioAngel Network has been supported by BIRAG. Many of the investors here sometimes don't have the full context. And innovative products in medical devices and drugs typically have had a very good audience among risk-taking investors who understand what that new breakthrough could mean in the context of medical, clinical, biological, all of that. They have several people who are PhDs in different areas sitting in their VC groups able to do this evaluation. I don't see that among any of the VC groups here. Okay, so that could be one reason why they're pushing back. They don't have the capabilities sometimes to address an early stage invention coming out of the labs. If somehow you're able to raise angel funding, bring it to a first product which has some early revenue started, I think you will find more traction among the local VCs because they see something tangible, right? It's not just a scientific experiment that has generated some good outcomes. It's actually something that is generating revenues, which they are more used to with the IT models that are prevalent here, fast to revenues models. So this is the mindset maybe that you're seeing. Given that there are VCs from the US established here in India that are also doing that funding, but most of them have been funding later stage companies. That's the challenge, right?
Yeah.
So I would say that my suggestion would be to try and find angels here. Going to the US, you're facing two struggles. One, if they are coming in as a board member on your company, which typically a significant investor will want to be, they want that company, especially a young company, they want touch points very frequently. Are your CEOs going to go there? frequently. Are they going to come down here? They're not going to come down. They've got too many things in their portfolio. You're also facing a headwind against local entrepreneurs and innovations that are, they see over 1,000 deals a year. Okay, minimum of 10 deals a day have to be just moved through in the local environment. Now you insert someone coming from India and you can immediately see the wall you have to climb over to get attention. So either you have done something that is really breakthrough, which you can go globally to raise money for that, or you have done something very specific that that investor is investing in that they haven't found enough of that in the local markets, and you are able to bring that in. So targeting the investor and knowing the investor is actually a very important part of pitching and understanding, you know, a successful pitch.
Okay.
I don't know if that's helpful
Yeah,
to you.
I think that's helped. The second question I had, I'll leave the floor for other questions. Second question was, you just talked about making a global pitch, you know, at some stage. You know, you would maybe start India, but then make sure that the product reaches to the global market. Would that also entail setting up manufacturing outside the country, say in Europe or America, in order to sell the product in these places?
Not in most cases. Depends on the expense of the product, temperature that you're transporting, all those issues. But typically, FDA will visit and has over, I think, 400 facilities that are certified by the FDA. So they have a regular presence in India. And so if your product is going to be launched in the US, the FDA will want to see your manufacturing facility here. Either you contract a approved facility or you build one and get it approved. So you don't have to manufacture outside.
Thank you very much.
Didn't know I was allowed a second question.
Someone else in the back, a student? Yeah, go ahead. And we'll come back to you.
Sir, after getting the grant of any BIRAC grant,
Yes.
does BIRAC help in first clinical regulatory approvals and clinical trials?
So they don't help with regulatory approvals because that's a totally different body, governmental body, and BIRAC has no say in that matter, right? But they do have a relationship with that regulatory bodies. They have incubators that are set up in clinical centers that will help you for clinical trials. And they have incubators which have support systems with people that will advise you on regulatory. So that's part of the incubator. So you need to assess which incubator you want to be part of. And there are at least 12 incubators that are affiliated with hospitals directly that would be useful for your clinical trials. That's what I would recommend. No other questions?
For the thoughtful talk. So my questions are very specifically related to a problem we are solving for. Let's say US is our main target market. So do you, what are your thoughts in terms of like whether we should be setting up things in US directly as a company, or should we be doing things in India and later on shifting to US? Because raising regulatory money, particularly for US in India, can become a problem.
Yeah, I don't know problem because the money is available here. I don't see that the issue. The issue is more around what do you need to build in the US in order to access those markets. You will need a local regulatory presence over there. Either a consultant group can be hired, so you don't have to build necessarily in US if it's only about accessing the markets over there. If you're trying to raise funding, that's a different equation, right? Like as I explained before, the investors will want an early stage company to be locally present. The US markets by hiring and contracting groups that are there to help you to move through the process over there. You don't have to build your entity. But my recommendation would be if you are mature enough to have a product that is going in for a full regulatory filing, you will probably want to hire someone in your company that is the point person representing and knowledgeable to understand how to manage the contractors. You don't just want to run it remotely with just consultants there. That's, if that helps.
My question was about your so what.
Huh.
Yeah. So how do we inculcate this so what culture, whether in faculty or students, and no all, and how early should it be done?
Oh, that's a tough question. The mindset for academic research is very different. It is not the so what question they ask. It is more, how can I take this failure into a new paper? How can I take this into a new grant? How can I get into this conference proceedings? Those are your metrics. Absolutely, you should be, academics, researchers, and scientists are and should be thinking along those lines because that's their profession success. But if they are involved in translation, you can do two things that I've seen useful. You can have in Columbia, for example, we have a lab to market course that is taught. Most of the postdocs attend that course. It's a kind of a requirement in order to get support from Columbia Tech Ventures to develop further, get support from the Tech Venture group in Columbia. So let me just stop there. I think that's probably the best way. Have a course that is an adjunct to whatever other courses they're taking, and say, if you want to do something, we will support you, but you got to go through this course first.
Right.
And that allows you to teach the so what and the kind of gestalt that you need to make in the same research you're doing in your lab. You're probably doing the same research in the company, but the context is so different, the decision making is very different. And so you can teach that. Yes, absolutely.
I'd like to request Professor Ravi Gudi, Dean of Alumni and Corporate Relations, to come on the dais and thank Dr. Mehta with a memento.
Thank you. This memento actually belongs to all the people who ask the questions over here, because it's the good questions that make for our audience. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think we have some time.
Yes, sir. We can continue with discussions while having tea. I request you to please have your seat.
Yeah, and thank you again for the invitation. It's enjoyable.
Thank you, Dr. Mehta, and thank you, Professor Gudi. May I kindly request Mr. Rajesh Gopinathan to please deliver his vote of thanks? Okay. It will be Professor Anu who will be delivering the vote of thanks.
And Dr. I need that. Can I hold it? Will that be enough? Yeah. Dr. Mehta, or Shifral as I call you, that was fascinating. It was extremely timely also for us because IIT Bombay is definitely seeking to work on translational research. We have some stalwarts in that area, but a lot of our faculty are still teething in this space. Many of our students are. So wonderful timing and great lecture that you had for us. I'm sure there were many more people watching online, and we'll forward it to as many. Look forward to doing more work with you in the future, Dr. Mehta. Thank you very much for the visit.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Professor Anu. I'd like to thank the audience, the dignitaries, and the online viewers for joining us this evening. Kindly requesting the audience to join us for tea in the foyer.
Thank you. Thank you.